he was only 6 years old. His mother had just wished him good night. Then the bombs fell. July 1942. In a small Russian village, a little boy named Sergei Alyoshkov woke to the sound of screaming. His house was on fire. His brother was dead. His mother, gone. Alone. Crying. Surrounded by war. Sergei ran into the forest and into a nightmare. What happened next is not a storybook. It's not a legend. It's a real war crime no child should have survived. He joined a regiment. He wore a uniform. He was given a gun. And he became the youngest soldier of World War II. This is a true story. Subscribe now to MysteryPlaybacksSeries and watch to the end. What you learn next will haunt you. In a quiet village, July 1942, Kalak, Russia. It was a warm, silent evening. The trees stood still. The wind didn't blow. Birds chirped like nothing was wrong. But far in the sky, something deadly was moving fast. In a small village called Kalak, in the Soviet Union, a young boy named Sergei Alyoshkov lay beside his older brother, Petya, in a wooden cottage with their mother. He was 6 years old. Sergei smiled as his mother tucked him in. "Sleep now," she said softly. But Sergei didn't want to sleep. He wanted to stay awake and ask questions. Why do planes fly? Why do leaves fall? Why is Papa not coming home? Their father had died in the war, just months ago. But Sergei didn't fully understand what that meant. Outside, the grass swayed gently. The moonlight lit up the trees. Peace. But peace was only a mask. Suddenly, boom, boom, boom. A deafening roar tore across the sky. Explosions. Flames. Screaming. The night turned red. German warplanes flew low, dropping bombs over the village. Wooden homes shattered into fire. People ran. Mothers screamed. Children cried. Sergei's mother grabbed him with one arm and Petya with the other. "Run," she shouted. Sergei's tiny legs couldn't move fast enough. He fell in the dirt. His mother picked him up again. They reached the edge of the village. Smoke and fire rained behind them. Sergei turned around. His house was gone. Just smoke and splinters where he had slept minutes ago. Then another sound. Gunfire. Petya, his 10-year-old brother, turned to look. A shot rang out. Petya fell. Petya! Sergei's mother screamed. But there was no time to cry. More German soldiers were coming. She pulled Sergei into the woods, deep into the trees, farther and farther until her breath gave out. And there, she collapsed. Blood. Silence. When Sergei woke up, it was morning. Birds chirped again. But now, it felt wrong. He looked beside him. His mother was still. Her eyes were closed. Her hands were cold. "Wake up, Mama," he whispered. She didn't move. Sergei sat beside her for hours. He waited. He hoped. He called her name. Then the hunger came. The fear followed. He walked through the woods, tiny legs pushing through thorns and wet leaves. No food. No water. Just trees. And silence. And the image of his brother's eyes as he fell. After 2 days alone, Sergei saw someone. It was a man in green. A soldier. Not a German. It was a Soviet officer, part of the 142nd Guards Rifle Regiment, returning from a ruined supply run. He looked down at the boy, covered in mud, trembling, eyes empty. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Sergei," the boy whispered. The soldier knelt. "Where's your family?" Sergei looked at the ground. Then pointed to the trees. That was enough. The man picked him up and carried him back to camp. Sergei didn't cry anymore. He didn't scream. His eyes were glass, too tired, too young to understand grief, too broken to resist. But his story was only beginning. The camp was full of men. Guns. Boots. Firewood. Curses. Laughing. Blood. Sergei stood out like a ghost. "What's a child doing here?" the other soldiers asked. The officer explained his village was wiped out. His mother's dead. His ours now. They gave him a small uniform. A cap too big. Boots he couldn't walk in. And a coat that dragged in the dirt. The soldiers called him Little Comrade. He followed them everywhere. He fetched firewood. He cleaned boots. He sang songs. And at night, he lay in a shared bunk, curled between the men who fought beside tanks and died in ditches. The war didn't stop. But now, Sergei had a purpose. He was 6 years old and already a part of history. The men loved him. He made them smile in the darkest hours. He reminded them why they fought. For children like him, for homes, for peace. But some nights, Sergei still cried softly. In his dreams, he saw his mother reaching out. In his sleep, he called his brother's name. One officer, Commander Kuznetsov, became a father figure. He taught Sergei how to salute, how to march, how to be brave, even when scared. Sergei tried his best. He wanted to be strong. He wanted to make the men proud. And slowly, he did. One cold morning, the commander handed him a medal. For battle merit. Not for fighting, but for surviving. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to @MysteryPlaybacksSeries. Because the truth that truly haunts might be closer than you think. The war didn't wait for Sergei to grow up. Every day, the front line moved closer to the regiment. Tanks rolled through shattered villages. Smoke covered the sun. The men no longer joked. They whispered. Commander Kuznetsov began training new recruits. Sergei watched from the edge, silent, observant. He wasn't allowed near real weapons. But he learned to spot enemy movement. He could mimic their code words. He knew which trees German snipers preferred. Sergei wasn't a mascot anymore. He was part of the team. One morning, he ran into the command tent. "Enemy troops near the river bend," he said, pointing at a map. The commander blinked. "How do you know?" "I heard them whispering. I saw shadows." They checked. Sergei was right. That tip saved an entire platoon from walking into an ambush. 50 men, alive, because a 6-year-old was listening when no one else was. From that day, Sergei became something else. An honorary scout. He rode in the supply truck. He stayed near the radio tent. He learned who to trust and when to stay quiet. But the things he saw, they weren't meant for children. Once, he found a soldier in the field, eyes open, unmoving, his chest torn. Sergei stared at him for minutes. Then, without a word, he pulled a small flower from the grass and placed it on the man's chest. He didn't cry. He just walked away. In winter, the soldiers were freezing. Food ran low. Bullets ran lower. They sat by the fire, staring at the flames. That's when Sergei asked, "Can I write a letter?" To who? The commander smiled. To Stalin. The men chuckled. But Sergei was serious. That night, with a pencil stub and torn map sheet, he wrote, "Dear Comrade Stalin, my name is Sergei. I am 6 years old. I live with the 142nd Regiment now. My mother is gone. But the commander takes care of me. We need boots. And warm clothes. The men are cold. but they fight hard. Thank you for helping us. Little soldier? The commander mailed it. 2 weeks later, supplies arrived. Spring came. But spring in war feels like survival, not hope. Sergei was now 7. Smaller than most children. But inside, something had changed. He was harder. Quieter. He laughed less. He watched more. One day, the regiment marched toward the Dnieper River. An attack was coming, they knew it. Sergei was told to stay at the back. But he snuck ahead. He hid in a trench. He watched with wide eyes as tanks rolled in and bullets screamed over the hill. A soldier beside him fell. Sergei crawled to him. He tried to stop the bleeding with torn cloth and trembling hands. The man gasped, "Tell my wife." I tried. Sergei held his hand until it went cold. That night, the camp was hit. A bomb landed just meters from the bunker where Sergei slept. The blast shattered wood and metal. Men screamed. Sergei was thrown against the wall, unconscious. When he woke, he was buried under boards. The commander dug him out with his bare hands. Sergei opened his eyes slowly and whispered, "Did I die?" "No, comrade," Kuznetsov said, holding him tight. "Not today." After that, they moved Sergei away from the front for a while. But even miles from battle, the war stayed with him. He drew pictures of tanks. He walked like a soldier. He saluted trees when he passed them. This boy was no longer a child. Months later, the regiment gathered for a small ceremony. The commander stood before his men, scarred, proud, exhausted. And beside him stood Sergei Alyoshkov, in a new uniform, freshly cleaned, hat fitting just right. The commander cleared his throat. "This child," he said, "has shown more courage, loyalty, and spirit than most men. He lost everything. Yet he gave us hope. He reminds us why we fight. Not for flags, but for futures. For that, he is awarded the Medal for Battle Merit." The soldiers cheered. Sergei didn't smile. He only looked down and whispered, "Mama, did you see?" Later that night, Sergei sat alone. The stars were out. The woods were quiet. The medal felt heavy around his neck. He picked up a stick and began to draw in the dirt, a house, a tree, a river. Home. Then, he buried the stick and stared at the sky. A soldier walked by and said, "You're too young to understand what you've been through." Sergei looked at him. "I'm too young to forget. This is not fiction. Every detail is part of a real case that you can verify yourself." March 1945. It was spring again. This time, the explosion stopped. The gunfire faded. The smoke lifted. And one day, a voice on the radio said 3 simple words. "The war is over." Soldiers shouted. Some dropped to their knees. Others lit cigarettes with trembling hands. But Sergei Alyoshkov, now 8 years old, just stood there, quiet. He looked around. He saw men hugging each other, crying, laughing. And he whispered to himself, "What happens now?" The 142nd Rifle Regiment disbanded in late 1945. The men who had become Sergei's fathers, brothers, protectors, they packed up and left. One by one, Sergei hugged them goodbye. Commander Kuznetsov knelt before him. "You made us proud, little soldier." Sergei's lips trembled. "Where will I go?" The commander reached into his bag and handed him a small tin box. "Inside is everything you need to find your way back to a normal life." Sergei opened it. Inside was a folded photo, a train ticket, and a handwritten letter that said, "Find your childhood. It's still waiting for you." But childhood never returned. Sergei was sent to an orphanage in a small Russian town. He didn't speak much. He followed orders too well. He stood at attention when teachers entered the room. And at night, he sometimes woke up screaming, dreaming of flames, of forests, of voices crying out and never answering. The other children called him the general, half in fear, half in awe. But Sergei didn't feel brave anymore. He felt forgotten. Worse, he felt like he didn't know how to be a boy anymore. He wasn't interested in toys. He didn't laugh at jokes. He didn't run when it rained. He only stared out windows, waiting for someone to return. Years passed. Sergei grew older. Stronger. But quieter. As a young man, he found work in a railway yard. Then, as a factory mechanic. Then, for a while, he simply disappeared from records. He didn't talk about the war. People knew him as serious, reliable, polite. But inside, he carried the faces of men who died beside him. He remembered the smell of gunpowder. The sound of boots running through frozen earth. The weight of the medal in his pocket, a medal he kept wrapped in a sock, hidden in a drawer. He once told a co-worker, "I was a soldier before I knew how to read." It wasn't until decades later, in the 1980s, that Sergei's name returned to the world. A Soviet historian, researching forgotten war heroes, came across an old regiment photo. In it, 20 soldiers stood in formation. And right in the middle was a child. Wearing a cap. Holding a rifle almost taller than he was. The caption read, "Sergei A., youngest comrade of the 142nd Regiment." The historian tracked him down. Sergei, now grey-haired, soft-spoken, opened the door. "You've been missing from history," the historian said. "I didn't want to be a story," Sergei replied. "I wanted peace." But he agreed to speak once. Scene 19, the forgotten hero speaks, ***. In a rare interview, Sergei shared pieces of his truth. "I remember the night my mother died. Her hand let go. That's how I knew. They gave me a medal. But I would have traded it to go home. The war made me grow fast. But it also froze me inside." He never called himself a hero. He never called himself a victim. He just called himself a boy who didn't get to be a boy. When asked what he would say to children today, he paused. Then he said, "If the world gives you peace, keep it safe. Don't ever lose it. Because once it's gone, you might not recognize yourself anymore." Sergei Alyoshkov passed away quietly in the early 1990s. He lived a simple life. No headlines. No monuments. But the men who once stood beside him never forgot. Some still carried faded letters from him. Others spoke of the boy who stood in a trench and saluted without fear. His medal was donated to a small museum in Russia. And beneath it, a plaque. Underscored to the youngest soldier of World War II. Not because he wanted to fight, but because the world gave him no choice. The orphanage he once stayed in is now closed. But the window he used to sit by still looks out over a quiet street. And sometimes, people say they see a small boy in uniform, staring out. Waiting. Watching. Listening for a world that has finally gone silent. Have you come across this story before? What do you think truly occurred in his heart after the war? Can a child ever return from something like that? If these kinds of stories intrigue you, subscribe now to @MysteryPlaybacksSeries. Because every week, we expose the lies in every mystery with the truth. Watch the upcoming video on your screen, or slide into our full playlist of real mysteries and crimes. The next story might throw you off guard.